Hey, Jeff here with Providence Sound and Vision. We're here at Pacific Grove Soundworks with the owner, Jermaine Hamilton. In this video, we're going to give a tour of the newly founded Pacific Grove Soundworks, go behind the scenes, show you some of the studio gear and technology, and learn a little bit about Jermaine's history and philosophy to making records. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for trusting Providence to help you to realize your vision. It's really been a lot of fun and an honor to help you.
Thank you so much.
We helped Jermaine to put this studio together over about it's been almost a year now, it seems, since we started
Almost a year.
Yeah, since we first started talking. But after a lot of construction, a lot of wiring, and a lot of elbow grease, the studio is now starting to do sessions. You had your own studio in San Francisco. You've traveled around California working in different studios over the years. Would you tell us a little bit about when you first got the bug to be a recording engineer?
Yeah, when I first got the bug, I was a high school student in the late 90s going into the 2000s, which we all know was kind of the digital transition as well. So I was a high school musician, played jazz and classical trumpet, and we got the opportunity to record at Studio D in Sausalito. So as a teenager going into the studio for the first time, I was blown away. Just walking in and seeing the mixing console and all of these racks of equipment that were alien to me at the time, and seeing the live room and the microphone setup, it sold me right away. I said, this is what I want to do. From there, I went to assist and intern at a studio in the Bay Area called the Music Annex. It had a Neve console, Wyndham Hill, the jazz label, George Benson, they did a lot of recordings there. And then that ended. I got the A&R magazine that listed all the local recording studios in the Bay Area. I printed out really nice looking resumes on the most expensive paper I could afford at that time. I mailed them out to every studio. Eventually, I had the opportunity to work for Jingletown Studios, which is in Oakland, California. And then the first day, they said, oh, by the way, this is Green Day Studio. One of my first CDs was Green Day when I was a teenager. It was a very magical experience. I was there for about 6 months, and then I decided to move to Southern California and pursue more experiences and education in the field. I just always wanted to have a really deep understanding of concepts. Took some classes at Citrus College.
Oh, sure.
I graduated top of class. I'm still in the back. Top graduating students got opportunities to go work with the Recording Academy, and so kind of opened up some doors. And then from there, I did some work out of the Village Studios. I spent a lot of time at Nightbird Studios under the Sunset Marquis Hotel.
Yeah.
On the Sunset Strip.
Very cool, yeah.
They would have a lot of VIP artists there. Drake and Jamie Foxx, Usher, CeeLo Green. And I think what I took away from them was that they do add like service on top of the studio experience, especially since it is underneath a 5-star hotel.
Right.
It helped me learn that service is key, providing an experience to the artist and making them feel special. Comfort is key, and so it also should feel homely and inviting. I feel like it shouldn't feel so sterile that you feel like you are walking into like a scientific laboratory or something, and there's gonna be engineers with like white coats on. And coming back from Southern California, my first paid gig was at Hyde Street Studios in San Francisco, which is a historical studio in San Francisco, home to Grateful Dead and Grace Slick, Digital Underground. Did some great recordings, assisting and engineering, and doing my own sessions. I got to cut my teeth on analog equipment from end to end. Analog recording is a craft of its own.
You know, something that just occurred to me, I came up around the same era, learned on analog, resisted digital for a long time.
Right.
You know, there's something to recording analog where you have to rehearse and you have to be ready to record, and the tape is expensive, the time is expensive, and you don't get the ability to fix it in editing, right? And a key part of being an engineer or producer is really, you're kind of like a psychologist and a coach, right, to the musicians. They're in a place where they feel vulnerable, building up the creation of this song or this record for months or years, and now it's time to commit to it and commit by releasing it to the rest of the world. And there's a lot of pressure on the psychology of an artist there.
Absolutely.
And when I realized recording analog makes you really good at that psychology, because you have to coach them through being their best, being comfortable. You can't just cut it up and comp out of 60 tracks. You have to commit to a take with a few punch-ins. So you probably had a similar experience.
Yeah, you can't fix it in the mix.
Yeah.
Whenever I think of a recording is you're capturing something in time. That happened at this instance in this time. So it is something special, and it is something you want to look back 10, 15, 20 years and listen to, and not only be reminded of where you were then, but also just capturing the essence of what occurred. With digital, it's easy to do 50 takes, find every nuance and phrase and make it perfect. And it's also easy to doubt yourself or to want to go back to the drawing board and redo something a million times, and then next thing you know, what you've ended up with wasn't what your initial conception was.
And you have to go into it with the confidence and the bravery almost of like, you know, okay, we're doing it now, we're not going to fix it later.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really good learning experience. It's a kind of a luxury these days, but if anybody, you know, has the opportunity to do an analog session, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. And you still have an analog tape machine here too. You really could do an all analog recording right off the API console.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, you can go straight to tape.
For the types of microphones you have, ribbon microphones, tube microphones, through discrete analog preamps to the tape machine. What was the first studio that you created for yourself? It was your business.
To actually circle back to the Music Annex, during the 2008 financial crisis, I had moved back to the Bay Area and I was recalibrating. There was a lot of shifting going on. So I was, looking for some gigs. So I called Music Annex. They said, yeah, come on in. And the studio, though, was now located in San Mateo, California. Unfortunately, the Music Annex had closed and a little company called Facebook took over the facility. So the new space was a little punk rock. And a lot of the legacy engineers at the Annex had jumped ship. So I just moved up quickly. I started assisting, then engineering, and then eventually they just kind of tossed me the keys. And we got angel funding, so we started to spruce the place up. We changed the name to Studio Circle Recordings in San Mateo, California. We were there for about 8 years. It was a 3,000 square foot facility with multiple rooms, and a big warehouse in the back, foosball, pool tables. We had some great artists come in there like Ed Sheeran, U2. We also did a lot of voiceover. We did a lot of video games, podcasts, audiobooks. We had Chef Gordon Ramsay come in and do voiceover for one of his video games. I thought that was really cool. And no, he wasn't a jerk. he was very pleasant in real life.
Shut the place down.
Unfortunately, the pandemic closed us down.
As we were talking about the use of this facility, you really wanted to be able to accommodate anybody with an audio need, right? We've been talking about music, motion picture. Tell us a bit about the philosophy of Pacific Grove Soundworks. That's a purpose-built facility. What did you build it for?
Our setup for world-class tracking and mixing editing, but we are happy to also have podcasts and audiobooks, film post-production here. We want the studio to be open to the community and for anybody who has recording or production needs. I feel like production and creating is communal, and I think that that's just something we're missing. I think we did get kind of used to working remotely and making music via Zoom and things of that nature, but let's make music together.
Obviously, you have the beautiful API console. You have a lot of outboard gear. There's a system that's installed. You made the investment in Dolby Atmos immersive sound system.
Yeah, it sounds amazing, and I do give Jeff credit for that. The first idea for the space was really kind of up in the air. I thought about building the space out kind of punk rock style, but then I met Jeff, and it's just such a special area that we wanted to bring something special. We just said, hey, let's go all out. I was on the fence a little bit about Atmos and Immersive, but when you hear it and when you experience it, it's almost hard for me to go back now to hearing stereophonic recordings, because now when I listen in the immersive format, it's just so emotional. Stereophonic recordings are amazing. Monophonic recordings are amazing, don't get me wrong. But I really like the immersive because it feels like I'm learning engineering all over again. It's almost like being a 2D cartoon animator and then going into like a 3D world, right? Like Disney going into Pixar. So as an engineer, it's almost like you're back to the drawing board, and it just opens up this whole new paradigm. Your artistry palette is now all around you.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm seeing a lot is, especially the big record labels, publishers who have a catalog of music, is they're taking recordings that were really intended for mono or stereo, even vinyl, and they're just kind of spacing those recordings out in Atmos. The production wasn't thought of as this is where it's going to go. Back in the day, when vinyl was the only format that a consumer would buy music on, they would cut test lacquers to see what a mix would sound like to vinyl, because that was the format, right? They were writing, they were structuring the sequence of the songs so that as you get closer to the middle of the record, you put your quieter songs. You know, some of the bands like the Kinks would kind of have like their silly shanty songs like in the middle.
Right.
And so they were writing music and producing the record for the format. You don't really see that so much for Atmos yet, right? People are still kind of recording everything in stereo headphones, recording everything, you know, with a stereo perspective and spacing it out. So I look forward to seeing what some creative talent does, like with 3 dimensions of space to work with. Listening to your story, you know, what I'm hearing is you, like many of us, you were a passionate musician. You fell in love with the studio bug. You wanted that to be your life. There's a tone in the recording industry, or even in the studio business, like, don't build a studio. Record labels are cutting the budgets. Bands can record from home. You started as a musician with that passion. But as you've grown and you've learned from all these different studio owners and all these different businesses, you're not treating it like a business.
Right.
You can record a record and you know, have fun with the band here, but you can also support an audiobook. You can also support PGA tour that needs audio support. You can do an immersive mix. If a director does a film overseas and then comes home to his home on the Monterey Peninsula and wants to hear dailies and wants to hear edits, you can support that. So, you know, you've come full circle. Like, you're still working in what you love, but you now have a business can sustain with different verticals, right? Different departments that you can support within the industry. So
I love all of that work. I also think having that diverse experience, it kind of crosses over in other areas of the work too. So sometimes things I learned from doing voiceovers can help in music, or something from music can help in doing voiceovers. Like maybe someone's being too sing-songy when they're speaking, or maybe you want them to be sing-songy. I'm your sound guy.
And you're one of the nicest sound guys I've ever met, but then that work with Gordon Ramsay, you probably have a few biting Gordon Ramsay quips if you really need to like turn it on.
Shut the place down.
So we took a stroll down memory lane, learned a bit about your history, coming together, the culmination of your experience at a variety of different studios to here at Pacific Grove Soundworks. We're looking at a pretty nice toolbox of audio toys, some of which you had before in your previous room and some of which Providence helped you with. Let's talk about some gear. The centerpiece, of course, this API 1608 console. You were actually about to buy another console when we first started talking.
I was about to purchase an AWS. It was a consignment console. They didn't have any service records on it. There were some concerns of longevity and quality, but I also wanted a board for color because I do tracking. SSLs are very transparent, great for mixing, and so I just wanted a little mojo, a little vibe. I've used vintage APIs before consoles, the 1604. So I was very familiar with the sound of it. I've looked online and I hardly see the first generation API 1608 fully loaded with the 550 EQs and so on. So basically I jumped on it. It is a fantastic color box. It has mojo, it has vibe. It can be transparent. So if I am doing something more Americana or acoustical, it can provide that fidelity. But if I'm doing something with more bottom and low end, it can be very punchy.
Push it harder, you have to drive into the mic preamps a little bit more.
Exactly. I love having the Outboard EQs. They're faster. There's something about these 550As. There's so many newer EQ brands that have been based off of this design. When I, mix or track, I kind of go for what feels right. So I'm not necessarily going for, okay, I'm going to cut at 80 hertz and I'm going to cut a boost at 1K. I'm going for more vibe and character and what blends well together.
You're using your ears more than rules say. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And so having an analog EQ to grab and listen to rather than anytime you're looking at a plugin, it kind of it sucks you into that world, right? Where here you can kind of just listen and be
and
tactile
make
with
your
the controls.
adjustments as it goes. And it's really great to be able to use it with outboard gear. We do have it normalized to the Wolff Audio MeMore analog headphone distribution setup, which is fantastic. It's really nice to be able to track entirely with outboard gear. You do not have to set up Pro Tools templates and sims and returns. Everyone can kind of track off the board. You can have Pro Tools in the background capturing the line ends on it, but otherwise you can stay in that analog domain and route your hardware inserts, your compressors, the EQs. So you just kind of get that sound more immediately, and right out the gate, it just sounds awesome.
Something I really like about the API consoles in general is it's really a timeless design. This console is not too far off from what you experience with the 1604. You brought up Credence before, their own API console, Sunset Sound. That era of API console, it's pretty much the same thing. There's really no modern technology built into this console, so you can always upgrade your computer around it or upgrade your converters over time, but having this as the centerpiece of the studio really should prove to be, return its investment for years to come.
Exactly, and when you said classic or timeless, it's, what do those things mean? It means something that stands the test of time. So whether it's a year from now or 10, 20 years from now, it'll always be relevant.
You have a little flare in the center section. I see the Q2 760s, one of the best drum compressors of all time.
Yeah.
The compressor that's in that is very similar to what was in the Helios compressors, and that's what they recorded Led Zeppelin when the levee breaks, that drum break that was sampled and used so many times was compressed with that Helios compressor, which this is kind of the same thing with a few more bells and whistles.
It's almost like every setting sounds really good.
Can't find your favorite.
Yeah, and then the classic 527 compressors.
I see just a lot of, again, timeless tools that have been used on records for decades. You have the Audioscape homage to the Pultax, another Audioscape homage to the Blue Stripe 1176.
Yes.
The Golden Era LA3As, the Overstayer MAS.
Yes.
And then a more modern boutique piece, the Hazel Rig VLC. What have you been using the VLC on?
I used the VLC recently as a bass guitar DI. I have also used it as a color box on pre-recorded vocals. So I just switched it over to line in, and it has the Pultec style EQs there. So I used that with some pre-recorded vocals to kind of get some nice color and blending options. I like it because I was able to attenuate the top end that you get from like an Acousto TI like that.
Piece of gear that is kind of understated here in your rack, but it's really important for everything to work so well is the Lynx Aurora.
Yes.
You trusted my recommendation on that. And one of the main reasons I recommended that is because Lynx offers the DigiLink connection as one of their options. You can get Thunderbolt or Dante, whatever you need. But in this case, you're using a Pro Tools HDX system.
Yes.
We discussed why Pro Tools HDX was important in this operation. And really the biggest reason is because of the automatic delay compensation. The Lynx Aurora mimics one of the Avid HDIOs. And so when you're using the console, when you're using any of the outboard gear as an insert, it allows you to use it as an insert. It automatically makes up for the round trip path of latency.
Yes.
So that any of your outboard gear can be used like a plug-in.
Yep.
You can be monitoring on the console in real time and not worry that the performance is going to be off by a couple of milliseconds, right?
Yes.
Which when a lot of the music you're trying to record, you're trying to get a feel, right? The players want to be like in the groove. They want to be, a little behind the pocket, or they want to be pushing it a little bit to give some energy.
Exactly.
A lot of modern converters, that little bit of latency that isn't made up for, it kind of just sometimes is almost like a subconscious, like, what happened? I thought we were in the groove.
Exactly. Exactly.
So.
And I've experienced that, or sometimes it might sound like it's like phalanging or something to the artist. There's like a delay from their direct voice and the recorded playback in the tracking session. And not only that, the Lynx just sounds awesome. It's, mastering grade converters. It is rock solid in its stability. The clocking is tight. The drivers are rock solid. It's a good, reliable company. They stand behind their work. Customer service is top notch if you do have any issues. And I believe it's future compatible as well. so you can always upgrade it.
Yeah, I've seen people using the previous generation of Lynx Aurora for 25 years.
Yeah.
In this workflow case, you're recording an artist, you're setting up the headphone mix from the console using the auxiliary sends, and those auxiliary sends go straight to the Wolff MeMore. So what the artist is hearing is really a straight wire. It's the speed of light from the microphone back to their headphones, all over analog. It's not running through the computer, and that connection really, you're probably experiencing it. Even you're probably experiencing artists who've never recorded that way, right? Because so many times they're monitoring off of an interface, and they've just gotten used to dealing with that little delay. You're probably getting some artists that, besides hearing the U47 through through something like the VLC or your needs, like it's like that sounds amazing. But when they hear themselves in phase, they're like actually
And sometimes it's so transparent that they don't even know that it's on. Initially, they'll be like, "Am I getting signal?" And because it's just coming back in real time. But what's amazing too with the MeMore is the amount of gain that it has. I'll tell them to crank it of gain so they can easily turn it up. But if they turn up too much, right, we got to take care of our ears and stuff. But it's just amazing the headroom and how much it can handle, and it really doesn't distort at all. It's clean all the way through. We have the Hear Me function that folds back built-in microphone on the MeMore into the headphones. If you still can't hear yourself, hit the MeMore. Now you're getting direct signal, and you can blend that to a taste into your headphones. It's just interesting psychologically how a canned mix affects an artist or a drummer when they can hear themselves and set up their own mix. It's almost like a confidence booster too. I've had older systems where you kind of have to put a disclaimer. You're like, okay, what you're hearing there is not what I'm hearing here.
Right.
So now they hear it and they're like, oh, this sounds fantastic. Oh, this sounds great. And therefore we get better takes right away.
It's an expensive headphone system, right? Each mixer was $1,300. It's an investment. Do you feel like it's paid off? It sounds like you're a fan, the artists are a fan.
Yeah, I'm sure this will probably be a new standard or a new classic piece of equipment. It's all about the details. It's kind of like the things that sometimes people don't focus on. Everyone wants to get the nicest microphone they can afford. They want to get the fastest computer. And then sometimes they do that at the cost of properly treating a room, getting a decent playback system, things of that nature. And I think having a good cue system, again, it's always about the artist. And when they can hear themselves, it's just those little things that add up to create a successful session.
Speaking of those little things, something that strikes me, it was another recommendation I made, and you trusted my recommendation, was going with Equitech Balanced Power.
Yes.
So you have two Equitech Balanced Power units. One is a 20 amp 2RQ that's down below the console, and that powers almost everything in this room, right?
Yes.
And then the other one is out in the tracking room for guitar amps, keyboards, pedal boards, anything like that. Balanced power, it's almost like one of those things you don't notice it. What you do notice if you pay attention in this room is it's very quiet. The faders are all up. You don't hear that hissing sound.
You really don't. And you know, the thing with dirty power is that you're getting public utility power coming in, and you get whatever noise is inherent with those transmission lines. For example, they are building a new hotel right next to our studio. There's been a lot of construction, drills and saws. That stuff can actually get into the power lines. And so you can be doing a tracking session, and the next thing you know, you hear like an oscillation, you hear like a buzzing noise. Sometimes there's electromagnetic issues in your environment, or you're near like a cell phone tower or a radio tower. Having clean power, again, it's one of those invisible things. It's not, you know, super sexy. Definitely my audio engineering colleagues think it's cool and awesome, but it's just one of those set it and forget it things. It's there. It's one less thing you have to worry about as an audio engineer, especially in like the analog domain. Having something like an Ecotech to immediately help balance out the noise floor, bottom out a little bit, and just lets you focus on the music. It helps you with your dynamic range, so you can maybe record quieter instruments such as a flute while having some punchy drums tracking, and you don't have to worry about gain staging.
You really made some investments to put the infrastructure in place to give the elevated experience. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people aren't going to put Equitech balanced power in all analog headphone system. It just goes to show like how all these little nuances can compile to make a better sounding experience, a better workflow experience, a better creative collaboration. It's almost like if you don't have to worry about the power and the interference from the construction site next door, it just lets you relax. Doing a session and having to like chase down those problems, and plugging ground lift adapters and trying different DI boxes, and maybe you set up over in this side of the room instead of over there. I mean, that can really be a buzzkill.
It can make or break sessions. If they lose trust in you, it's almost over.
Mercury recording 666. Did you know David Marquette from the Bay Area?
Yes.
You did?
Dave Marquette is awesome. Shout out to Dave Marquette, Mercury Audio.
That was one of those pieces. There's a lot of compressors that come and go, and everyone's cloning 1176s and the Fairchild 670s and 660s, but he knew about this sort of more esoteric model, the 666 Fairchild, and it's a hybrid of solid state, kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
What have you been using it on?
It is an instant modern classic. I have used it for female vocals. I was tracking some Americana here, and we tracked through it just to kind of catch a few dBs of her performance. It has that really cool DC adjust knob.
It kind of changes the knee.
Yeah.
So how the threshold interacts.
Yeah, and I believe the original unit that was on the back of the unit.
It was on the back, and you had to get in there with the tweaker and set it. And you couldn't really use it like an aesthetic adjustment. Yeah.
Right. So being a faithful recreation, all Dave did was put that on the front panel. It's just like another color tool, and I am loving it right now.
What I like about this compressor, in my experience, compressors that give you a lot of controls almost tend to be like a one-trick pony. You get into it too much, and then you find where that control should be, and you just almost wish it was locked off. But with this, it really gives you this palette to kind of paint with in a way where everything is detented, so you can always kind of go back to where you were.
Yes. I really like that feature on there. And then there also is a little bit of shelving EQ on top of it.
It's a Baxendall style,
Yeah. I thought the addition of the wet mix knob was really cool. So maybe if you do want to push it a little bit more and then kind of blend that to taste, you can make it simple for tracking where, maybe it's just doing some gentle compression during tracking. And then in mixdown, you can really sculpt your sound and you can really discover what it can do. And I'm still discovering all the different tones and sounds that it can do. And I don't really think I've scratched the surface yet.
Then you have the Heritage Audio HA73s. That's the full Neve homage with the EQ. And then you've got a couple of the BAE 1073 MPs too. So you have 4 channels of Neve flavor, 16 channels of API flavor in the console. Hazel Rig gives you hi-fi, glorious tube sound. So you have a variety. You also have the UA 4710. So a variety of mic preamps to cater to find the best one for the vocalist or the genre of music.
For mixing, I will go line in and I'll use those Neve style EQs on guitars or drum overheads, room microphones, and I just love that Neve style saturation.
What I keep hearing you say is how you're using your gear both on mixing and tracking. It's a very curated list of outboard gear, some of the most tried and true analog designs, and you're finding a way to get a lot of mileage out of them.
Yeah, definitely. When I do track with outboard gear, sometimes I will commit to that going in line, but there are other times too where I will use it as a Pro Tools hardware insert, so that way it is not committed. I can get a Q mix going through the MeMores, just sounding nice, just throwing some hardware inserts on the tracks, going to the artist. Then in post, mix sound editing, I can further dial that in and fine tune it rather than having it committed if I didn't want it to be committed. So you kind of have your choice of how you would like to work in that way. And so that is really fun.
We talked about it earlier in the conversation with the workflow and the services that you offer here, the Neumann immersive audio system. The heart of it is really the Grace Design M908. That's your monitor controller.
Yeah.
Everything runs through that really, right? That's the console goes into the Grace, your Kali Audio Bluetooth, and your computers.
We set up a immersive 714 setup. So that's 7 surrounds, 4 height monitors, and then the subwoofer. We chose the Neumanns because of the MA1 automatic alignment software. So every monitor monitor in here has an Ethernet port. Those Ethernet port, we create a local area network via a switcher, and then that's connected to your computer. Everything calibrates automatically. The MA1 system comes with a MA1 microphone. We set the microphone into a equilateral triangle, the main left-right monitors. We turn on the software. Several clicks later, the MA1 automatically aligns 12 monitors. For us, that saves us a lot of time and efficiency. So rather than calculating room modes and doing each monitor at a time and maybe having a little bit of human error in the mix, we can quickly calibrate 12 monitors for Dolby Atmos. It's fantastic. You can also have different profiles. We can save that profile, and if for whatever reason, if we want to recalibrate it, or we have some more furniture arriving into this control room, we can save a profile, and then we can also create like a new profile if we ever need it. And we had a before and after when we first initially set them up versus after calibration. And it was a night and day difference before and after calibration. The realism out of these monitors were just stunning. It just gives me peace in mind that what I'm hearing will translate. And it also allows the immersive effect to take place. We can hear the three-dimensionality of the mix that we're working on. And also too, if we're playing back other Atmos mixes, it's true to the original form of the original mix or mastering engineer, right? We can really hear the nuance and what their intentions were.
Yeah, even more so than say like the dream of the audiophile. What I understand of it is like they want to hear what it's like to be in the session with the artist, right?
Right. Yeah.
But a lot of times those audiophile speakers are like 10 times more expensive than like the the PMCs or the ATC25s, whatever people were using to make their records. So they're not hearing it with the same context as the producer. But when you have a well-tuned Atmos system, the standards of tuning the Atmos system are more consistent from where it was being produced to where it's being delivered. So I feel like that is one way that the consumer of music could hear the intentions of the producer and the artist a little more accurately, right? I'd imagine too, like the MA1, it's confidence inspiring, right? Just to know that the brilliant engineers at Neumann were like, this is how you do it, just trust the system and run the calibration. And you've had to do it a few times because when we first installed the speakers, the acoustics weren't up. Right. Right?
Yeah.
So you and Archie put the acoustics up over many weeks, so then the system had to be retuned. And then the control room glass, that was on back order for a long time. So there was holes in these walls and you put the glass in and had to retune the system. And I could see the MA1 is such a fluid process.
In general, you want pinpoint accuracy of where different instruments or sounds are within that soundstage. Being able to maybe recalibrate if needed, or being able to translate other recordings, the system really expedites and simplifies that process.
The last thing really to talk about in this room is the room itself. You went with GIK Acoustics for the acoustic design, and you already had a handful of their panels, right? So that was kind of the starting point, is you've already know their panels and like them. What was it like going with GIK as an acoustic consultant and designer?
To be honest, I mean, it was very minimal back and forth. Their specialist used their 3D software. We gave them dimensions. We told them the intentions. We gave them the layouts of the studio space. They did all the heavy lifting. I would say right out the gate, their design was nearly spot on. They understood my intentionality was that I do like a combination of absorption and dispersion. For example, all of the ceiling panels have wooden slat diffusers built into them. So not only are they absorbing, but tucked away beneath the fabric are wooden slat diffusers. So we're still dispersing and spreading sound in a musical way back into the room. We have bass traps all along the back wall, and we have bass traps behind the console and the front monitors. So we have a nice controlled low end, which is critical. And I do think that's, one reason that people do prefer to go into a professional studio to mix, is because it's very, very challenging to get low end if you don't have a treated room or if you're mixing in headphones. So they nailed it, playing back music and walking around the space, listening to nulls or build up a bass around the room. And this room is completely balanced.
Yeah, it sounds good. You can feel it when you walk in. We talked a little bit about your choice of going with Pro Tools HDX. The first thing that came out of my mouth was the workflow when recording an artist, right? Everything is in real time. There's automatic delay compensation with the HDX and the Lynx Aurora. But I remember now in our conversations, you wanting to be ready for motion picture. HDX and being able to sync video to audio, it really is a lot easier with HDX compared to like some other formats where there might be a little bit of a latency over USB-C or an interface like that. The Lynx Aurora is a DigiLink connection. The Grace M908 is a DigiLink connection.
Yes.
You have HDX is sort of like your main sound card, so now really anything you do is delay compensated and locked.
Playback, recording playback, zero latency. Lock into picture is very important, especially maybe if you're doing like ADR event, automatic dialogue replacement, and you have the actor recreating their scene to a video of whatever content they're doing. So to be able to lock that voice to the motion picture, you need to have zero latency. The great thing about the Grace 2, I like that it has several inputs right on the screen right here. So if I'm monitoring off of Pro Tools, I can select the DigiLink. And if I'm monitoring straight analog, I can go to stereo, and I don't have to worry about changing any settings or repatching anything or having some kind of loss in like a signal chainer. I can just easily go to stereo, and now the API is being bused to the Neumanns or the PMCs. If I wanted to monitor both outputs for whatever reason, I can just do that with one click.
Thank you for the tour of your control room. So now let's check out the rest of the studio. You have a vocal booth and a tracking room, also done with GIK Acoustics. So we'll take a tour of the rest of the facility.
Awesome.
All right, so we are continuing our tour of Pacific Grove Soundworks. We are now in the vocal booth. The vocal booth, the acoustic design was also by GIK. I really like how in the control room you've got a nice moody, it's darker, it really feels very comfortable. The analogy you gave was kind of like a spaceship, and it kind of has that feel. But when you come into the vocal booth, the design has a lighter color. Even though the vocal booth is a smaller room, it helps it feel very airy. I could see a singer or voice talent being very comfortable in here. It's about 7 feet wide by 12.5 feet deep. So plenty of space to set up a vocal chain that you just keep going here, and then maybe have on the other side of the booth an amp for overdubs or isolation if you wanted to do drums and have some ISOs. This room connects to the control room and the other rooms with custom wall panels that Providence Sound and Vision designed for the space. We worked with Jermaine and his workflow, the connectivity he wanted for his workflow going from tracking to mixing. And as we mentioned, this is a very multifunctional studio, so we needed the ability to go from tracking to mixing to mastering to doing voice actors to recording a band. So it built that all into the workflow and the patch bay design. This wall panel right here connects to the console's patch bay, and then it also connects to the main tracking room, which is to my right. So we included speaker connections, mic connections, video connections, and for the Wolff MeMore, there is an option to use either DB25 or Cat6 cables. In this case, we went with Cat6 cables. So it's not digitizing the signal like other headphone mixers would be. It's just using the copper on the Cat6 to conduct the analog signal. So you stay analog, you stay real time with no latency, and then the custom wall panel that we created has enough Cat6 to feed this MeMore and then daisy chain to the other MeMores in the main control room. Certainly last but not least, this beautiful U47.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We're proud to have it here.
What are some of the other microphones you have?
We have a U87 AI, which is a desert island voiceover type of microphone. And we also have another tube Neumann, which is the M49V, which we really love as well. And we have 3 Heiserman microphones. We have the Type 19, which is actually voiced to be like a U47, but in a smaller, more compact version with additional multi-pickup patterns as well. So it's really useful for throwing around on different instruments or toms. And then lastly, we have the Heiserman H47 FET.
I've had great success with that particular microphone on rap vocals.
Right.
It's really forgiving against plosives and sibilants, so I would imagine that'd be fun to experiment with voiceover too.
Oh yeah,
I think you'll get really good results there.
Awesome.
So we're gonna continue the tour and step into the tracking room, which is just to my right. Here we are continuing our tour of Pacific Grove Soundworks. We are now in the live room, tracking room, recording room. It's called many different things, but this is the place where the musicians come together.
Yes.
You can put a band in this space and record everybody all together. Why don't you walk us through, give us a little tour of your tracking room.
So each room, the control room, the booth, and the live room, all have different color schemes. We wanted the live room to be creative and bright and interesting. We wanted it to look nice on camera. So we kind of brighten up the room with the burgundy and the blonde diffuser finishes and the gray panels, white ceiling panels. And we also wanted the room to be a little more lively. So a little less than half the room, we have polycylindrical diffusers. So that way the sound propagates in the room in a nice lively fashion. So it isn't anechoic, it isn't totally dead in here. The room still has some life to it. The air's still moving a little bit. The molecules are still kind of moving. It was really fun that GIK helped us design the ceiling panels going in a different angular fashion. And to me, they kind of remind me of like ocean clouds. When I look up at them, they kind of blend into the wall, but they also have diffusion built into them as well. So they are absorbing, but also keeping the room lively.
So between the corner bass trap diffuser, ceiling, bass trap diffuser, the polycylindrical, there's almost more diffusion than absorption in this room. It feels bigger. You were playing drums earlier when we were setting up, and it feels like about twice the size of what a room this is. So there's certainly enough space in here to put a 4-piece band, 5-piece band. It breathes. It's got a nice feel to it. Tell me about this drum set.
It's a beautiful vintage Ludwig kit. Quest loves a kit like this. It is extremely versatile, from jazz to rock. In my opinion, there's nothing like the vintage Ludwig sound. It's my personal favorite.
And then for that sound, you have a variety of microphones that can pull different aesthetics out of the drum kit. So 421s on toms, standard, just killer. 441, I love a microphone with a leather handle. Sennheiser, please never stop the leather handle. And then on the kick drum, Beta 52 on the inside and the Heiserman Fat 47 on the outside. So just greatest kick drum combination of all time. You can't go wrong there. But then for overheads, you have a variety of overheads, right? So there's 414s, Coles, Royers, Sheps. You have a variety of pairs. So if you're doing something that's more purist jazz, go with the Sheps. It'll pick up like brushes and kind of the nuances of like a purist jazz player. If you have a hard rock heavy hitter who's gonna be like hitting the cymbals really hard, the Coles will mellow them out and kind of gives you some different palettes to paint with when recording drums.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. In my opinion, the overheads are one of the most critical pieces of a kit. So it really brings together the overall sound. So having the C414s and the Coles and the Sheps and the Heisermans really give us the option to find the right sound for whatever genre that we're recording.
And so when we were putting this together, you came into this with a nice arsenal of equipment, a lot of gear, and then we went shopping together and added some really beautiful gear, the U47, the Mercury. But one of the things that, you know, a lot of people wouldn't think to spend money on is a mic stand. And you trusted me. I said, you know, for this environment, you want the Latch Lake 2200.
Yes.
Are you happy with that purchase?
It is definitely an investment, but we believe it's all about the details. It's all about the small things. So this Latch Lake, it is kind of one of those little small details that, you know, would be an afterthought, but it cleans up the room, it cleans up the floor space. We can attach any combination of microphones to the Latch King, and it gives it a very minimalist look. So definitely if you're filming, it opens up the room and it saves space for other musicians and amplifiers and setups.
With this setup we have here, we could see, you know, the overheads are the 414s are well secured, but then off the same vertical you can add these extra booms. We've got hi-hat, top snare, bottom snare. So from the one stand, we've got 5 microphones.
5 mics.
And I've done it in the past. If you were just to pull this out a little bit more towards the rack tom, you could also do rack tom and front kick off the same. It
gets a little Frankenstein-y, but it's definitely possible. And especially if maybe you only have so many microphone stands with booms available, if maybe you do have a bigger ensemble or setup than you normally have, you can easily reallocate these booms for other instruments and use the additional arms that this Latch King came with.
Last thing in this room I just want to point out is the custom wall panels that Providence built for you. Fredo installed them. All 3 spaces are now connected with this wall panel. You have microphone tie lines, but then also speaker tie lines if you wanted to put a cabinet here, but the head in the control room.
Yes.
You know, which is people like to do overdubs that way. Or there's also video tie lines. So if you had a composer who was scoring a piece or writing to picture, you could have a video screen out here for the composer. So we really tried to think of anything, like what might come to a full service facility, and you have the infrastructure and the connectivity to be able to really adapt and provide service to anybody.
Yeah.
We're gonna continue the tour just a little bit. We're gonna go outside of the studio. This is one of the most beautiful parts of the world. That's really one of the huge benefits to this studio is like the neighborhood is awesome. We've been enjoying great restaurants when we've been having breaks from this video shoot. We're 3 blocks away from Lovers Point Beach. It's almost like the drive here helps you get into the mindset of I'm going to a beautiful place to make beautiful music. So if anybody would like your service, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
The best way to get a hold of us, you can find us on social media, Instagram at Pacific Grove Soundworks, or you can go to our website, pacificgrovesoundworks.com, or you can shoot me an email directly, which is Jermaine at pacificgrovesoundworks.com.
All right, very cool. And we are Providence Sound and Vision. You can reach us at provsv.com. Thanks so much for watching.